We're told that the central mission of this so-called fiscal event is to ignite growth by lowering taxes and cutting regulation. But where is the evidence that cutting taxes will stimulate growth? The Institute for Fiscal Studies say it's a gamble at best. So is this plan just a big gamble?
No, it's not. It's about asserting that if we want to get back to the trend growth that this country enjoyed before the 2008 financial crisis, the 2.5% average that we used to see, then we need to get back to the measures that we know work, and which, of course, we saw during the 1980s and 1990s helped to stimulate a period of huge prosperity in the British economy. And that is to say, making sure that alongside clearly a major programme of government investment, that we focus on the real drivers of growth, and that is to say reducing the burden of tax facing both businesses and families. That's something which the Prime Minister put at the heart of her leadership campaign this summer, and today we're going to see that translated into action through what I think will be a really important and game-changing financial statement.
OK, well, let's take a look at one element of it. We're expecting a scrapping of the planned rise in corporation tax. You talked about how business will be affected, but what difference will that make, for example, to growth? Will it actually work? The Institute for Public Policy Research has questioned this theory that low corporate taxes boost growth. They point out that in 2019, the UK had the lowest corporation tax in the G7, and yet we also had the lowest rate of business investment.
Well, corporation tax is just one of the levers that we need to look at as part of the drive to unlock growth. And clearly, it's not for me to preempt what the Chancellor is going to say in his statement later this morning. You cited national insurance a few moments ago. It's obviously vital that we honour the pledge that was made during the 2019 general election campaign that we wouldn't raise that tax. And that's something which the Chancellor has confirmed will now be scrapped with effect from the 6th of November, that increase in tax. That's worth £330 for 28 million people. But he's obviously going to go much further than that, and he's going to tackle what is a record high tax burden on families and businesses, reflecting clearly the fact we've gone through some extraordinarily difficult years, but setting out a fundamentally new approach to go for growth, to make sure that we win the argument that a more successful enterprise economy is good for the whole of this country, and it's that which we need to unlock today.
Well, if you're confident that this plan will work and growth will be boosted, why has the Office for Budget Responsibility not been asked to produce its independent analysis of what it means for the economy, as would normally go alongside statements like this?
Well, the OBR will be producing a full forecast later in the financial year.
But why not now?
Well, precisely because, as they themselves have said, that given this is a short notice event, they would not be able to complete the usual quality of analysis that they would offer. And so they will be asked to conduct that modelling alongside subsequent events later in this financial year. This is an attempt to kickstart growth. It's delivered at short notice at great speed, and we've been working on it huge rapidity over recent days. But it is not something which the OBR can model to their usual standards, but they will be doing so in due course.
But are you concerned of the effect that could have on the markets? The pound, for example, has taken a hit recently. Don't the markets need to see what these policies will do for the economy and whether we can afford them?
What the markets want to know is whether the UK economy is going to grow, and that is something which the Chancellor is setting at the absolute heart of our strategy, that the UK wants to get back to those levels of trend growth that we used to enjoy, and critically catch up with other parts of the world where dynamic economies are surging ahead. The risk is that Europe is in a pattern of stagnation. Britain can't afford to be part of that, and we need to set out today how we are going to get to a much higher level of sustainable growth, and that's going to be driven through lowering the burden of tax.
Well, if the rise in corporation tax is scrapped, then businesses will be very happy. Liz Truss has acknowledged that the scrapping of the rise in national insurance will benefit the wealthier more. Labour says that this government has moved from levelling up to trickle down. You're levelling up Secretary. Are you worried about this government being seen to be helping the better off more than the poorer people?
Absolutely not. This whole term trickle down is such a nonsense and is itself a centre-left mischaracterisation of what this government is all about. We need to grow the economy because a more successful economy is good for everybody. If we have a more successful economy, then the tax take goes up. That tax is what funds our vital public services. It is a virtuous circle, as the Chancellor will be saying later today. We need to get to a situation where the UK economy is stronger, is more dynamic, is more robust. That in turn makes it easier to pay for the services on which the poorest and the most vulnerable in our society rely. And as Levelling Up Secretary, I'm absolutely delighted that we're going to be going for growth, going for new policies like investment zones, which will benefit some of the most left behind communities in our country and help to unlock growth opportunities there. So I'm really excited about today, and I'm absolutely confident that a more successful economy driven by lower taxation is the way to greater prosperity for everybody, regardless of where you come from or what your circumstances are.
It's so interesting because when you were Chief Secretary to the Treasury not so long ago, when the national insurance rise was announced, you were a big fan of it. So why are you so pleased that that's now being reversed?
Well, I served the government of the day, and with a new Prime Minister comes new prerogatives. But to be clear, we are going to stand behind the investment in our NHS and social care that was announced by Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. We're just going to pay for it through general taxation rather than through this specific levy. So there's going to be no change to our level of commitment to fund the health service. What we are saying is that we want to have a more dynamic enterprise economy alongside it, which will obviously make it easier to pay for that healthcare over the long term.
Well, let's look a little bit more about how it's being paid for, because back when the national insurance rise was being introduced, you said then that the government had to be honest with people about the need to raise the money. You said it was simply irresponsible for us to whack it all on our debt when we know that's already at a record high. And you said that just amounts to taxes being deferred for the next generation. So are you now being irresponsible, whacking this all on our debt?
No, because what you're doing now is you're going for growth alongside it. I think the critical thing is we need to get the economy growing so that, frankly, the economic growth trajectory outstrips that of our debt. And that is what the government is determined to help deliver. The fundamental difference between our philosophy and Labour is that they would be spending on non-productive outputs. We will be making a statement today which is about actually unlocking the productive sectors of the economy. If you are creating the conditions for stronger underlying growth through tax cuts, that's a very different proposition to just spending for spending's sake, which is what the opposition, I'm afraid, remain committed to doing. We are trying to unlock better trend growth, and that puts obviously the whole question of how you pay for public services on a fundamentally different footing. You're talking about a very different economic proposition and a very, frankly, bold and welcome switch to an open embrace of growth as the main task of the Exchequer.
We're told that part of the plans are these local investment zones in 38 areas in England, which involve, amongst other things, liberalising local planning to release more land for housing and commercial development. So how much say will local residents have in the planning and the building of this infrastructure in their area?
Well, investment zones are a really important part of the Chancellor's statement, and I shouldn't preempt that. But what I can say is that these zones will only happen where there is local consent, and we've been very clear about that in the discussions we've been having with local authorities and mayors over recent days as we've been testing the proposition with them. I'm delighted to say there's been a huge level of enthusiasm in those discussions, and we hope to be able to make very rapid progress over the next few weeks in terms of confirming where these zones will be located. But to be clear, they will only happen where there is a local appetite for them to occur. There will be no top-down imposition of these zones. We want to obviously create the best possible opportunity for local areas to get both targeted tax breaks and a liberalised planning regime, and that's something which we'll be setting out more detail on over the coming hours.
Well, on the subject of local appetite for things, Jacob Rees-Mogg announced yesterday that the government's lifting the ban on fracking. Would you welcome fracking in your constituency?
Well, the key point with fracking, as with investment zones, is that it will happen where there is local consent, and where there is local consent only. It is right, clearly, that we look to explore all possible sources of energy generation including renewables, the nuclear industry, and conventional oil and gas, to make sure that we never again find ourselves in a position where we are so vulnerable to the actions of a hostile state, in this case, Russia.
So you want it in your constituency?
Well, no, to be clear, Anna, this is a matter for local communities and for local authorities and the planning process to determine wherever this can take place. That is the consent log on whether fracking goes ahead in any community. So it's not a matter for me or for any MP. It's a question of what local communities want.
And today's fiscal event, you've described it as radical, I think. If it is such a radical change to how things were done before, should there not be a general election and this be put to the people?
No, the country at this point needs clarity and certainty of government. We had a general election less than 3 years ago. There's a government with a strong majority in the House of Commons, and there's an urgent need for action today. That's why we've brought forward this package at the speed that we have, precisely because as the world goes through this extremely challenging winter, driven obviously by the ongoing after effects of COVID, but most seriously by Russia's criminal actions in Ukraine and attempts to weaponize energy, this country needs growth now. That's what we're going to deliver, and it's going to make life better for everybody.